Ms. Natalie and a team of people worked really hard last year at adapting what is the EYFS curriculum based on the changes that they've recently made to the EYFS curriculum, and adapting that to make it more appropriate for our EYC students as well, in the context of Malaysia, of course. So I quickly need to talk you through what we will be looking at today. So first off, we will look at what is the EYFS, because some families don't really understand where this comes from. So what did change? So they changed a couple of things. So we're going to just look at what changed, and then what's the difference between the bespoke curriculum, like I said, the GIS bespoke curriculum, and then the EYFS curriculum as well. And then how is it different? Why is it important? And then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. Now, I can't see faces, so if you can, if you have questions throughout the presentation, if you can maybe just type that into the chat box, and then we can get to that at the end so that we don't have to interrupt the flow of things. So first off, the EYFS framework sets the standards to make sure that children aged from birth to 5 learn and develop well and are kept healthy and safe. And this is from the UK. So it's based on the British National Curriculum for the early years foundation stage. And that's where we get the core of our curriculum from as well. So the whole GIS curriculum, our numeracy, our literacy, all of those aspects are based on the British National Curriculum. And same for the early years, we use the EYFS as our point of reference and to make sure that we maintain certain standards. Now, the changes to the EYFS framework have been made for 2 reasons. So they suggest that the changes have been made to, number 1, improve the outcomes at age 5, particularly in early language and literacy. And then also to then reduce the workload, such as unnecessary paperwork for teachers, so that teachers can actually spend more time with the children in their care. A little bit later, I'll look into this. I will expand on this because we are, at the moment, we are looking at personalized learning is kind of our focus at EYC this year. And I'll expand on that in just a second. Now, what are the changes? So there are 7 key areas of learning, and families who've had children in the early years will know that the 7 key areas of learning, there are 3 prime areas, which is communication and language, physical development, and then personal, social, and emotional development, or what we now call SEL. And then there are 4 specific areas, which are the literacy, maths, understanding the world, and expressive art and design. So those 7 keys areas, they remain the same, with small changes within them. For example, the expressive art and design, they've added an area called the performing child, which is something that's been missing and actually a welcome addition. So that gives children an opportunity to develop and demonstrate those skills that you would expect from a performer. So it's all about speech and language as well, but also confidence and a presence, right? So these changes that have been made, there's been changes made to the wording. So if you look at the what used to be the development matters, they still call them development matters. They are longer, but they are much more in depth. So for a teacher to look at the development matters and needing to track and monitor a child's development, because they're more in depth, it's also more specific, so it's easier to do. And then there's a new focus on early language and extending vocabulary, and I'll expand on that as well, especially with more examples of how to embed and develop vocabulary skill across all 7 areas, because this improves the child development in a broad curriculum. We all know that if you give a child the language and you give them the vocabulary to express themselves, they will exceed in all aspects of the curriculum throughout their school life. So that is actually also a very welcome addition. Now, there have been some major changes to the safeguarding and welfare section. So including, there's a requirement, for example, to promote good oral health for children. This is something we've been doing all along at EYC, so I'm glad they are catching up. And then the early learner goals have been changed to make them clearer and more specific. They are more focused on the main factors that support the child's development at the age of 5. So there's a difference between the early learner goals and then the development matters that we use to track and monitor. The early learner goals is in the past, we used the early learner goals kind of to teach towards and say, this is where a child should be by the end of reception. So we need to make sure they get there, or we need to support them to get there. But it's changed in the sense that now we don't look at the early learner goals until the end of reception. So it's almost like an assessment, informal assessment of a child at the end of reception to see when they're going to year 1, if they are where they should be in terms of those developed, like the criteria. So at the moment, like the way that we set our documentation up for staff is as well, they look at the age bands, and they will only look at the criteria for that age band. We're not teaching up, we're teaching broader so that we can make sure that certain skills are embedded with our students, that they have a really deep understanding or have developed the skill thoroughly before we try teaching up. And that's across the board, that's in primary as well. And across the board in education, that is, we want a strong foundation before we start pushing kids onto where they shouldn't be. Now, these age bands have been simplified to avoid tracking activities that do not support child development. Now, in the past, we had our age bands were months. So we had to say a child at 36 months would be able to do this, this, and this. Now it's a bit wider. So it's there are only 3 instead of 6. So you can imagine that would give teachers more room for their professional judgment. And they can make these judgments based on their knowledge and experience instead of just using the early learner goals and the age bands in the framework to track and monitor the child's progress. So at the moment, the 3 age bands, we have birth to 3. So you can imagine that one we kind of skip at EYC because we start at 3 years old. So we are looking at 3 and 4-year-olds, which is nursery, and then children in reception. So those are the 2 age bands we're looking at when we track and monitor development. Now, that's a mouthful, and those are the changes made to the EYFS curriculum. Now, if we look at the early years curriculum at GIS, the reason I say it's bespoke is because it's bespoke to our school. And a lot of time and effort and work has gone into this curriculum, still with the EYFS curriculum as our foundation. But we realized that a lot of the statements in that in the documentation, our children are usually exceeding or are usually a little bit ahead of that as well. So we've added extensions to that. We've also added our GIS learner skills because we believe those are important skills that we want to instill in our students from 3 years old. In the British National Curriculum, what they use are characteristics of effective learner. And we've replaced those with our GIS learner skills because we feel they are much more comprehensive and they cover a broader range of areas for development and the characteristics of effective learning. So this is also from the UIFs, but we firmly believe that these are the kind of the 4 pillars that the early years is built on. So number 1 is the unique child. So these are our drivers. It's important to focus on every child, their context, their culture, and make sure that every child has that sense of belonging in the classroom and see themselves in the curriculum. That's something that the British curriculum is not always very good at. They tend to, which is normal if you're in the UK, tend to just everything's around the UK and England and English. So what we've tried to do with the bespoke curriculum is to make sure that we make space for other contexts, the context of Malaysia, the culture here, and so forth. So that's why the unique child, and then those positive relationships with the children. So that's the first thing we do at the start of the year is to make sure that that's embedded before we start even touching the curriculum, is to make sure that that relationship with the students there, that they have that sense of belonging in the classroom. Because if we have not established that, it's pointless to even start to work on the curriculum. And then, of course, enabling environments. Families who've been around for a while will know the work that has gone into the environment at EYC, the physical environment, to make sure that that empowers students to take ownership of their learning, to make independent, to make it a space where families feel welcome, and so forth. So all of this then adds up to the learning and the development that we see in our students. Now, these are the specific areas we talked about earlier. We just gave them nice icons. So we have literacy, maths, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design. So you can imagine the literacy and the maths at this reception level is when we start preparing students for what is expected from them when they enter year 1. So that's when we start our phonics and we start the reading, and math we will start using the same kind of methods that we use in primary, so that when the kids enter year 1, they are ready to start the formal learning of those 2 areas of learning. Understanding the world, that's things like history, geography, science, where the kids can explore, and it's very explorative at EYC, very hands-on. And then expressive arts and design is just what it says. And then our prime areas, there's physical development, communication and language, and social emotional development. They're called prime areas because they're actually the foundation for everything else. We need to make sure our students develop physically the way they should. We need to make sure that they communicate, that the language we teach them and the way that we teach them to listen and respond and speak and perform, all of those things are really essential. The social emotional development, that's our CEL curriculum. And this year, especially, that's a big focus for us, is that CEL curriculum. We also have an adult CEL program for our staff, because we realize that you can't teach kids social and emotional to be socially emotionally strong and dependent if you can't do that, if adults don't have it themselves. Now, the golden threads, this is a term that we borrowed from the new primary curriculum as well, and that is, those are the threads that's running right through our curriculum. And we want to see that every day at school. We want to see it in every unit of work that we teach, every subject, extracurricular activities. So the golden threads running through our curriculum are these 4 aspects, and that's the GIS learner skills. These are our drivers for learning. Intercultural learning. This year, there's a focus group focusing specifically on seeing how do we develop this as a school even further. Our behaviors and values that we did a lot of work on last year, and then social and emotional learning. Like I said, that's being really rolled out this year with a focus on making sure that our students know how to manage their emotions, that they know how to talk about the emotions, and so forth. Now, this is something that you, as a parent, you would think, what if I tell you this? But knowledge is something that we haven't really focused on in the early years that much. We've never really identified the knowledge that they should be know the things they should know, because we focus so much on their physical development and so forth. But with this bespoke curriculum, Ms. Natalie and her team last year, when they sat down to develop this, worked very closely with subject leaders in the primary school to make sure that we call it the UBD, understanding by design. It's kind of a backwards design approach, where we start in secondary and say, this is what students need to know at sixth form. And then we work our way backwards to develop our curriculum and make sure, okay, so then that means in EYC, this is the kind of knowledge that we can start teaching the students and build on that. So we've identified certain pieces of knowledge that we think is important to start teaching at a very young age. And that has also been added into this early years curriculum. So all in all, that should be a child's kind of experience of their learning at EYC. You can see there's different aspects of the EYFs. We have our golden threads in there. We've got our KSUs, which is the key skills, knowledge, and understandings that we want our students to embed. Now, what does this look like for planning for teachers? And I'm very quickly going to talk through this because I don't want to bore you with the planning. This is kind of the planning wheel we've adapted. This is our own design. And what it comes down to is, in the early years and in primary, actually, learning all happens because of the planning that the teachers do, the observations that they do, and how they respond to that through their assessment. And those observation and assessment feedbacks into the planning. So it's this cycle constantly. And that's why personalized learning is so important, and responsive teaching is so important, because you need to respond to what you see in front of you so that you can respond to it and immediately react in your next lesson to make sure you address misconceptions or whatever you need to respond to. So this wheel actually explains it really nicely. So if we focus out, on the right is actually the primary, our primary curriculum planning wheel for teachers. And then on the left is our EYC one. So when we plan the journey, we always start with creating a need to know, because we know that children only learn if they feel there's a need to learn. If they don't see the need for learning, they will not learn it, right? Like I think I told families the other day, see how easily a child can teach themselves how to play a computer game online or use technology. It's because there's immediately a need for them to do that. So this is where teachers tap into interest, and that's how they hook kids into their learning, is by creating that need to know. So that's always the first step for us. Then once we've created that need to know, we start the front loading, and that's where all those key skills, knowledge, and understanding, and that's kind of the teaching aspects of it, are introduced to the students to support them. Then switching gears, that's when we then say, okay, so now you have the skills, now you have the knowledge, so now go off and explore. And then at the end of the learning, there's a reflection and see, so how much did they learn? How much of that key skills, knowledge, and understanding that we wanted them to get did they retain? And then that's kind of the reflection. In the primary school, I say in the primary school, this happens in reception as well. Teachers reflect with their students at the end of a day, at the end of a unit, so that they can think back to what they've learned and see how we can then in the next lesson build on that prior knowledge. Now, if you zoom in a little bit further even, it looks like this. So shaping the curriculum, that outer bit of the wheel is all about all the aspects that we think is important in GIS that we want to include in our curriculum. So that you can see the drivers for learning there. The principles of this instruction that we use are like Rosenshine's principles that we feel are important for teachers to master if we want to convey the curriculum in a way that will impact the students the best. Now, more importantly, is then focusing on what's the purpose of all of this. And the purpose of all of this is the unique child, to understand that each child is unique, each child develop at their own pace, each child bring all of those things there on the outer bit of that circle. That's what they bring into the classroom. So they bring who their parents are, who their family is, what their culture is, and that makes for a diverse classroom. It makes for other children learning from them, and we need to make sure as educators that we cash in on that opportunity to let the children learn from each other as well. So yeah, the unique child, that's what it's all about, and that's why we have this curriculum. So a bit about personalized learning. This is our goal this year at EYC, is to get better at personalized learning. So we will do research, we will share good practice, and find methods that's the best way to use to make sure that our learning is personalized to each and every individual child. Something that we will explore, and I think this is going to be a parent workshop further down the line. We are one of the actions that came out of our brainstorming for this goal is to start trying in the moment planning. So in the moment planning means on the beginning of a term or a half term, the teacher goes into the classroom without a lesson plan. So you have a blank lesson plan and the students help you plan whatever happens next in that term. So of course, it's not as simple as there's nothing. Of course, we have a long-term plan and we have a medium-term plan and we know where we want to go, but it's just tapping in on the students' interests and making sure that we get them involved and we follow their interests and use that to deliver what we need to deliver in the end that's planned. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. This is what a lesson plan, or this is what the development matters now look like for our staff. So if I zoom into that, you can see it's a little bit close. This is the one for communication and language. So what we've included is that area of learning. And you can see, because it's this communication and language, we link the GIS learner skill, which is bespoke to early years. And a teacher knows that this is kind of what I want to develop in these children when we look at the communication and language aspect. So for a 2- and 3-year-old, you can see those are kind of some of the statements, a 3- and 4-year-old, and then of course a reception age child. And those early learner goals, like I said, that is an assessment for right at the end of reception to see if students are where they should be in their development. This one doesn't really have a lot of knowledge because there's not a lot of knowledge really to teach when it comes to communication, but there are transfer opportunities. That's the we added this for our staff to know. So how can where do you give students an opportunity to transfer whatever they've learned or developed in this skill? So it's a very useful document for our staff. This is, for example, the literacy one. So the literacy one, you can see there's key knowledge. So there are certain things that we feel students should know. And then for this one, I didn't include the early learner goals because that's not the focus. The focus is really those age bands and see how students develop in those areas. We also then use the GIS learner skills, like I said. So there's documents for that, and it's bespoke, and it goes throughout the school. So we can see for an earlier student, that's kind of what we want to see them develop. And then it goes up all the way to secondary. And then, of course, for that observation and assessment, we use ILD. So when we're in school, that's what the teachers use to kind of track and monitor where a child is at by finding those little pieces of evidence. Now, this is not their final assessment. Their final assessment is based on their teacher judgment. This is just one bit of the information that in the end then inform the final assessment of a child's development. When teachers plan, they do a medium-term plan. And like I just said, it doesn't matter even if we do the in-the-moment planning or we explore that a little bit, teachers will still have a medium-term plan that says for this half term, these are kind of the areas we'll focus on. These are kind of the activities that we'll do. And those are the stages that we'll go through. But I think more importantly, and something I want to highlight here, is this aspect that we introduced. You will remember earlier when we talked about the changes in the EYFS curriculum, we said one of the main reasons was to make sure that students develop by the age of 5, that they've developed communication and language and vocabulary, especially because that gives them the language to be better in the curriculum. So what we are introducing at EYC is this vocabulary hierarchy, because we know that there are certain words that's familiar to most children. They might not be familiar to children who are new to English. So those are the kind of words that we put at the bottom of this hierarchy. And then, so every time teachers plan a unit or the curriculum for them goes into a certain direction, they need to go and really think about the words that the students use and how we can build on that to make sure that we also extend our more able students or our English-speaking students so that we don't teach down what we teach up, and make sure that we always challenge all our students effectively. So those high frequency words are the ones that you find in many different contexts. They can use in different contexts. It's not specific to one topic. And then those low frequency words is very domain specific words that will be at the top of this hierarchy. So you won't expect a lot of students to be using that, but you want to almost push the students from the middle bit up to the top bit of this pyramid so that they can develop the language. So there's an example. If the topic is water, it might be that most kids will know if you talk about water that, yeah, there are fish in it, it's wet, dry, cold, warm, fast, slow, you can drink it. So a bit more subject specific, but you can use it in different contexts, melt, full, empty. And then if you go up, something like dolphin, driftwood, sink, float, puddle, stream. So the words just get a bit harder. Right, now, the EY, if I can just go back to what they said in the beginning, what is the EYFS? So they say the EYFS framework sets the standards to make sure that children aged from birth to 5 learn and develop well and are kept healthy and safe. So there's a big focus on students from birth to 5. They also said that one of the reasons they changed it, one of the changes is to improve outcomes at age 5. The reason why there's such a big focus, and this is something we did last year at EYC, a huge study on as a teaching group. We wanted to understand the brain better. We wanted to understand how a child's brain develops so that we can then develop our curriculum to address that. And before the age of 5, if you don't know this fact yet, 90% of a child's brain development happen. So those first 5 years of a child's life is so important when it comes to making sure that all those connections build and they are strong and they are the right connections, right? After that, 10% of the development happen after that. It doesn't mean it's lost. It just means if you haven't developed certain parts of your brain before 5 years old, it's going to take more effort and it's going to be harder. You can still develop them. Contrary to previous studies that said not, in the 80s, they said your brain is kind of, you can't, now it's all about the, what's plasticity of the brain, that it's like a sponge and it can develop and you can make new connections even after a stroke. If you've suffered certain injuries in your brain, you can train the brain to make those connections again. But like I said, just much harder. So don't take it from me. I do want to share. Oh, this is also why the UN, one of their sustainable development goals about when it focuses on education is equal access to quality pre-primary education, because they realize that if we can make sure that all of our kids in the world have access to education in the first 5 years, it will have a massive impact on so many different areas. This is a 7-minute video that I really want to share with you because it's so impactful if you haven't seen it. And even if you have, I've seen this 10 times and I'm still amazed by it every time I see it. So sit back and relax. Right, I think that speaks for itself. I don't think Molly has any problems with communication and language, and she definitely kind of function at the top of that language pyramid. Last year, I did a workshop on serve and return, and I believe it's still on the parent portal. So do go and look back, because there's some strategies that you can use at home with the serve and return. And the reason I wanted to end with this today is to just stress the fact that we can have the best curriculum in the world. If we don't have the relationships and the connection with our children, that curriculum is kind of pointless. And I know some families got a bit nervous about the fact that we haven't started teaching certain parts of the curriculum yet. We're in the 4th week of the term now, and I believe this term you will see teachers starting to really hone in on the curriculum. But the reason for that is it doesn't matter if we're in school or not in school or online. We always start the school year to make sure that those relationships are there, that the children feel that sense of belonging, and that the teachers have time to assess where the children are at. Because a lot can happen over the summer, and it doesn't mean where they left us last year is where they are at the beginning of a new school year. This year, that was even more important for us. The fact that we started online, we needed to work so much harder to try and make sure that we establish those things. For the most part, at EYC, teachers are done with their baseline assessment. So we know where students are at, and we can now build on that and start putting in the next step in differentiated learning accordingly. So I just thought it's important that we do stress that at the end of this, And now we can move on to any Q&A. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, which means people were just fascinated by what I was saying and didn't have any questions. Yes, Renee's mommy.
Hi. So while we are hoping that we'll be face-to-face very soon and like fingers crossed, but the situation is fluid. I mean, there could be school shutdowns again or close contact, and then we're shut for 10 days or whatever. All of that is something that we are going to have to embrace ourselves to. So in a scenario like that in future, in term 2 or term 3, will you have more classes which are related to maths and phonics and writing? Because year 1 is uphill, right? It's really it's very steep. Mm-hmm. So will you be having more classes then in a situation like that?
Do you mean more classes as in more online classes?
More online classes which are specifically on phonics, maths, writing.
Right, that's part of the timetable anyway, right? So like I said, for the first 3 weeks, maybe we use those sessions at the end of the day as belonging sessions, we call them, right? So to make sure that we establish that sense of belonging, like I just explained.
Sure, yeah.
Moving forward, those sessions will turn into phonics lessons. Like we did that last year as well. Like last year, even when we started in school, we didn't have phonics from the get-go. Phonics only starts usually in week 7 that we start.
Okay.
So, but leading up, before we can teach phonics, we need to teach listening. We need to make sure students can listen to. So you can see all the learning in the slides around that. It's about teaching students to listen to different sounds in the environment, to listen to different sounds that you can make and form with your mouth, you know, so that they understand what phonics is before we can even start teaching them that letters have sounds, and then build on that. Okay, so that is definitely coming and part of the curriculum.
Okay, do we have any? Are we going to open this month? Is there any hope?
I tell you, I pray every night. I can tell you unofficially that the unofficial message we have from the ministry is that from the 1st of October, schools can start phasing back into school. Now, that's a very broad term, and we don't know what that means. But luckily, we know from experience that EYC, the earliest is usually the first who can go back, and the exam classes. Yeah. So fingers crossed, I put all my energy on the 1st of October for the latest. I know that the principals in KL, they've all band together and have a petition that they are getting signatures for to open earliest even sooner than that. So I don't know if that will go anyway, but we can only hope.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. Julia.
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
I heard you say that, I guess maybe a little bit of an admission that their knowledge has not been a focus in EYC, and now this year really would be on what the kids should know specifically.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can share with us as parents, since we're doing so much learning at home, so we can track, right, where our individual children are against what the list of knowledge that has been identified for the years in reception, for example?
Yes. So the plan with that, our next step with that is to, at the beginning of every half term, to share a curriculum letter with families and say, this half term, this is the direction we're going in with our learning. These are the words we are trying to cover, and our focus will be on these areas of the curriculum. Guys, and that's our rough guide. It was like we follow child's interest, so it might be that they throw us in a different direction, and then we give you a new set of knowledge or words halfway through the term, but that will be how we start every half term. Any other questions? Yes, Noah's mom.
I'm sorry, real quick. So you just said every half term will be 11 parents with the personalized curriculum that the children should be learning or focused on?
Yes. So the curriculum that we have on paper, we will kind of have an outline of
so we can measure against it as well.
Okay.
Yes. Understood. Thank you very much.
No problem. Because doing that, sorry, Noah's mom, I'm with you in a second. I know you have a name and I'll call you. the good thing about doing something like that is because sometimes families, if they know that this is kind of the topic that we are using, and then if it's related to food, then you can cook with your child and you can develop those things in a very natural and playful way rather than sitting and drilling it into them, right? So, right.
Hi, Ted.
Yes.
Yay. Hi, Etienne, and everyone else. I just wanted to say that that sounds amazing about sending out that curriculum letter. That sounds like what I've really been hoping for and felt like I can't really see where we're at doing this learning at home. And also what you were saying about really trying to make sure that you are tailoring your teaching for where each child is at. Yeah. I know that the first 3 weeks of the term are now been and gone, but I think that's why I've been finding these first few weeks difficult, because although I understand and I think your approach to building relationships is so important, all of the learning is things that Noah can do already. Mm-hmm. So, and he finds online really tricky for building relationships. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I just wanted to express that yes. I'm not sure that that has worked. It hasn't worked well for us, even though I understand and I think it's a great foundation and it would work really well in school. It hasn't worked for us at home. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping moving forward, adding in these extra phonics lessons, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't want to downplay what you just said because there's true value in that and we take on that feedback. But I do want to add onto that is, just like that girl just said, a child makes so many new connections a day that it doesn't matter what they are doing, they are developing and they are learning. Right? You might be thinking they're just playing with the Lego, but by playing through the Lego, they are making so many new connections that they didn't have before that you are not even aware of. So don't think that your child has not developed, because they do every single day. And in terms of the personalized learning, yes, you will see much more of that now, but now I need to throw the ball back in your court. For teachers to personalize learning, they need to know what the child is able to do at home independently, right? So that's where those ILD uploads become so important, because if they don't see children doing things, they can't inform their planning to then build on that to make sure that they extend that learning. So that's the situation we're in at the moment. So it is a partnership. Once we're back in school, that reverses again, and then you can see what the child's doing at school, so you can extend it at home when we share the ILDs. Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Just one quick one, if I may. Hi. I just wanted to know, this is regarding the uniforms.
Yes.
So we were told in the beginning that, we should order a bunch of them and think, just in case. So what we did as a new family for GIS, so we only ordered one set so far. Yeah. Also, because you don't know sizes and how things go when they finally start going to physical school.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know, do they also need to wear these uniforms at some point for these online classes, or maybe once in a while or something like that? Or will that not be needed till physical school actually does start?
It's not really needed, but it might be a good idea for families like you to kind of have uniform days and encourage all the kids to encourage it. But then on the other side of that, we've also, I think in the last newsletter, Ms. Nicola shared with families who's asked if they should be buying uniforms, say hold off and don't, because you never know if your child's going to outgrow that uniform by the time he needs to wear it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So if you want your child to wear the uniform, let them do it. There are many kids who show up to the online learning in their uniforms.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
Yes. Okay. That's why we just bought one right now, because we said let's keep it, you don't know what's going to happen. So
no, that's why. Well, if school opens, there will be like a grace period, and you can send your child in with their
Yes.
Normal
Because we
clothes.
still haven't bought the house, so his orangutan. So we haven't bought the house colored t-shirt is yet. We did the white short, the white t-shirt and the blue.
Yeah,
That's all we've done. So we said in case, just wanted to know if we need it online at all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks
All
for
right,
that.
not a problem. Anything else? Right, thank you so much. I hope you found that informative. Usually talking about curriculum, for us, we're very passionate about it, but for other people to listen to us is maybe not always so interesting. So I hope you found it interesting. You got something
It
from
was, yes.
And please, as you know, there's no question or no concern that we don't want to hear. It doesn't matter how petty you think it sounds or how ridiculous. We can't support families if we don't know what you're struggling with. And we also appreciate the positive feedback that we get from families, because that on the other side builds morale for our staff as well, who's working from home in the same boat. But thank you so much. The EYC community is always the best one to work in. It's always a positive place to be. And so we look forward to the rest of the year. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.